Hello, anti-novelists. Just checking in. This week is when we take a look at some different plot structures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over there to the stand-up desk, lay out the cards, and I'm going to introduce you to the Frankensystem. The Frankensystem is exactly what it sounds like. It's a system for plotting your story that allows you to take the pieces that work for you and get rid of the rest. So let's head over to the stand-up desk and we'll get started. Okay, here we are over at the stand-up desk. What you're looking at first is my plot box. Now, this is covered very thoroughly in chapter 2 of my book, Zettelkasten for Fiction Writers, which the writing is finished. Part 1 is completed by the editor. She is getting part 2 in its entirety this very weekend, so she can start working on that. So we are coming down the home stretch, guys. I can't even believe this book is done and getting ready to go through edits to get it into your hands, because then you can write your book and send it to me. So it'll be awesome. Here we go. The plot box. When I created the plot box, I created it as a tool to help me get my own novel written. Many of you have asked, what's in it and how is it put together? So let's just break this baby apart once and for all and let you see all of its guts. So here we go. You'll see first, there are 4 tall green cards. Those are Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and you guessed it, Act 4. That serves as the highest level of organization. So I've just taken a 4-act structure for a conflict-driven story, which is the kind of novel that I wrote, and I have given myself equal dividers into 4 sections. That helps me know where the middle of the story is, so where that key shift needs to happen in the middle that advances the story into the second half. I know the midpoint is right here, because it's marked by a card at 50% that says midpoint, okay? So let's get into the 8 major plot points that appear throughout these 4 sections. There's 2 in each section. In Act 1, the first thing that happens, the first marker for the story, is the inciting incident. That's something that happens that sets your character's world askew or sets them on a journey of discovery or change. So that's the first thing that happens as you build Act 1. The second thing that happens in Act 1 is that first plot point, and I've labeled it Awakening and Turning Point. So as you get to the end of Act 1 and you're about to break into Act 2, you've got this first plot point that is the catalyst into Act 2 of your story. And then you've got your 2 plot points in Act 2. You build up to the first battle or the first major challenge, which your character generally loses. And then you build up to the midpoint, which is the middle of the story. This is right before you move into Act 3. Okay? So your midpoint is that point of change or challenge that forces your character to, in the words of James Scott Bell, look in the mirror, slap themselves in the face. What the heck is the matter with you? What have you become? You got to make a change. And that's what drives them into Act 3, where the first thing is they fight the second battle. And then the end of Act 3 into Act 4 is that second plot point. Then you've got Act 4. They fight their final battle, which is the first marker in Act 4. And then you have the resolution or the falling off of the action showing them in their new world. I don't have a card for that because I just know that in my head. So what's all this other jazz going on in here? Well, let's take it apart and see. In Act 1, the very first things that I have are these, what I call prompt cards. There's 3 of them in each section. So I have Act 1, and then I have these 3 things. We meet the hero. There is some kind of disturbance, and perhaps they begin grasping at straws, or something peculiar happens. Or maybe they have a really bad day. Something sets them off kilter or turns their world topsy-turvy in the beginning of that story. Number 1, those things are bringing your reader in. It's what I call the offering. You're offering your reader a story that's inclusive of these items. Now, maybe you only use a really bad day to meet your hero. Maybe something peculiar happens and that's how we meet the hero. Or maybe we meet the hero and find them feeling that something is lacking, something is just out of reach. They're having some kind of struggle. These elements can be combined however you want to. That's why it's called the Franken plan or the Frankensystem, because you can pick and choose between these to build your story. Whatever you choose to put that main character through in this Act 1 is what leads you up to that inciting incident, right? Which that's the first thing that happens in the story to catapult them into the action. I've made some notes on this card reminding myself that often this inciting incident serves as a catalyst, which shows your reader the stakes. That is, what is at stake if your character doesn't deal with whatever you have revealed to be their challenge or their problem early on in your story. So then we go to the next section. So after you get to that inciting incident, which is your first marker in Act 1, you've got 3 more options for things that you can do. They could have a call to adventure. Something could set them on a journey. They could stick their head in the sand and say, you know what? I want nothing to do with that. I want no part of this. No way. Or you could pull the rug out from under them. Maybe they encounter the thing that is the incident that sets off the story, and then something happens and bada boom, they land right on their behind and are totally spun around by what's happened. You get to decide that. Now, in Chapter 2, I'm going to walk you through something that I call Vitzing, V-I-T-Z, variations in the Zettelkasten. That is what these additional prompt cards are. So within this section, which is behind the inciting incident card, gives me the options of things that could happen in my story. I have these additional Vitz cards. These are variations that could happen in my story. I'll just walk you through this one. The known or the limited awareness, showing the character in their normal world. Something creates a want or a desire. How does the character try to fulfill what they want? Is there tension? Is there frustration or maybe disappointment? Maybe they're facing a moral or an ethical dilemma. Maybe they're doing the right thing for the wrong reason, or they're doing the wrong thing for the right reason. I find that endlessly interesting. So often when I'm looking at the points I could include in a story, I usually consider this somewhere because I think it's fascinating. What if someone steals something, but they do it in order to help or meet a need for someone else? They've done the wrong thing, but they're doing it for the right reason. I think that's fascinating. That makes for a good story. You're establishing empathy or some kind of motivation for your reader to care about the character and the story. And then situations that reveal the theme, perhaps asking questions. I have jillions of these little cards. You can see the yellow peppered throughout my plot box. What that does is reminds me of things that could be happening during that section of the story. So that is how the plot box is set up. So you can see I go all the way through. I've got my first plot point, which is the second thing that happens in Act 1. Then we go into Act 2, and I've got my 3 prompts. I've got potentially they're meeting or revealing enemies and allies. Perhaps there are fun in games or games and trials. Cue 1980s rock montage. Perhaps they're earning respect. They're learning to step into this new role that they've been offered. So whatever's happening in this section, you're picking and choosing from those options and always remembering to pull those Vitz cards if you need some more options to drive that story forward should you get stuck. Then we have that first battle card, and behind the first battle card, we've got our 3 options. We've got potentially forces of evil are gathering. We've got maybe a problem is revealed, and we've got maybe they discover a truth and or are given an ultimatum. Those are all great things to include. Maybe you just do the problem. Maybe you just reveal the forces of evil and you push them right to that midpoint of the story. It's entirely up to you. You don't have to use them all. They're just there as a guide and a prompt. I've got my Vitz cards here. Things like the road of trials and they're failing. They're taking action and meeting obstacles. They're stopping in their own struggle, potentially to help someone else. So you're revealing something about their internal character and their own sense of generosity, what have you. We go to Act 3. We've got our 3 major options. We've got a mirror moment, which is a James Scott Bell-ism about facing the mirror and making a decision to make a change to move ahead in the story. Maybe they're planning what their attack is going to be. They're planning for that first battle. Maybe something or someone plays a crucial role in those decisions. So those are potential things that could be happening. We've got our second battle, which we know is our first point in Act 3. Then we've got our 3 options. They could experience a direct conflict, they could have a surprising failure, or maybe they reveal something that is shocking. They learn that holy crap moment. I didn't even see that coming. And that pushes you to your second plot point, which brings you to the end of Act 3. On my prompt card, my Witzen cards, I've got challenges and temptations. I've got maybe the bad guys are closing in. You're putting a little pressure on them, right? You're making the reader worry and turn those pages. Perhaps they're experiencing a dark night of the soul if you're going with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Any of these things could be happening or none of them. It's entirely up to you. That pushes us into Act 4. Our 3 options. 2 options. It looks like I'm missing one. Giving up and getting a pep talk from the mentor. So you never know how you're going to use these things or how these things are going to play out. That third one is seizing the sword. It's just filed in the wrong place. So then you get up to your final battle, that final push through to the end, and you've got your 3 potential options. You've got the evil is ultimately defeated. You've got them, maybe they make an unexpected victory. Maybe they're pushed right to the wall. As the novelist Richard Powers says, you just push them right up to the wall, and in the last moment, holy cow, they won. And they look back and think, I cannot even believe that happened. How did we pull that out? And then you've got the bittersweet return, which is coming home to their new reality and showing them living in their reality as it now exists. So that, my friends, is the plot box. Now, the important thing, how do you use it to get your writing done? As you're thinking through your story, as you're starting to brainstorm, as you're starting to discover ideas and directions for your story, as you're playing around with story elements, this is how you use this box. I have some cards here. The first card says, this is in a character's voice, I went up to the mountain stream and I caught a fish. Okay, this is my opening. Not terribly exciting, I'll be honest, but let's see. What if in this moment, in going up to the stream and catching a fish, as I think about that, I think, that could be a perfect midpoint. This going up, casting a rod, sitting quietly, having contemplation. Maybe my character is going to make a crucial discovery, a mirror moment while they're doing this. So what I'm going to do in my plot box is I'm going to flip back to the midpoint, and right behind the midpoint, I'm going to slip that card in there. This reminds me that when I'm writing and I get to the midpoint and I pull my potential midpoint cards, I'm going to see that and remember, oh yeah, I was thinking about having them go on that little fishing trip and have some kind of revelation while they're out there fishing. Okay, that's how that works. I have another one that says this character has a sad or baffled reaction. Okay, maybe I'm thinking about this in terms of, let's do it early in the story, this reaction that they're having. Let's go, ooh, this is perfect. Sticking their head in the sand. Okay, so I'm in Act 1. I'm behind the inciting incident. So something has already happened to force them to look at their situation and start to consider if they're going to take up the challenge that's been offered. And then I've got the potential story point of sticking their head in the sand. Well, if they have a sad or baffled reaction to whatever this inciting incident is, that's a great marker. So right behind head in the sand, I'm going to slip that card in there. So now, as I'm writing along, I'm using these card markers, these suggestions. This could be cards that have your research on it. This could be cards that just like these are just little prompts or reminders of things that I want to write for that character or elements of the story I want to include, whatever that looks like for you. That, my friends, is how you use the plot box. You use it for sequencing. You use it for housing parts of the story or scenes or story beats that you might want to include. And you just use it as a way to place those so that you can see your story as it starts to grow. Now, let's get crazy and let's look at an entirely different writing system. This is the second one that I'll show you today. In complete counterpoint to what we've just looked at, this is a conflict-driven hero's journey narrative, okay? So it follows that plot structure very closely. So this is for my extreme plotters. This is for my people that need all of those things kind of lined out visually in the cards so that you can sit down and get the writing done. What I'm about to show you, however, is a different system. This is a system, and I'm gonna have to take these out of here because this is gonna keep falling over. This system is based on a Japanese style of story that's called Kishotenketsu, okay? What that means is it's still a 4-act structure, loosely so. It's not rigid like the plot box structure. This is just a loose 4-beat story. It is not conflict driven. That's the most important part. So where this is challenges and hero's journey and questing and all those things, this is a quiet story. This can be more character driven. It can be more slice of life or meditative on a moment. But the key to this story is some kind of twist, some kind of turn on a thought, a small discovery, even just a reflection. Sometimes these stories don't even end. They just stop and they're over. So it doesn't require the same kind of structured planning that's required in a conflict-driven narrative. So let's break it down. You can see in the plot model, which I cover these in chapter 3 of my book, you have the key. The key is the introduction. You have the show, which is the development. You have the ten, which is the twist or the change, the turn. And then you have the ketsu, which is the reaction or the conclusion. But let's break that down even further. My first tab here is my key. So I have my key cards, which show me, I have my 4 cards, which show me what these 4 things mean. All right. So I have 1 card for each of these story beats. So the first one, to remind me when I'm writing, we'll call them acts. Let's just call them acts, even though they're really sections. They're not proper acts as we talk about it. For the introduction, you have some kind of setup. It establishes the subject or some slice of life that you're going to look at. You're bringing your people right into that character. Your opening focus, okay? So you're just putting that lens on some singular thing so that your characters or your character resonates with your reader. You'll notice down here, I credit this to Minamoto. My dear friend Tatsuya Minamoto sent me a delicious breakdown of this stuff with lots of washi tape, I might add, and walked me through what this structure actually looks like traditionally in Japan. So I was able to get the boots on the ground scoop about this stuff, which is important to me because in my book, I want to give you the most authentic look at the things I'm sharing so that you can really dive in and take what works for you. So thank you, Tatsuya. You, my friend, are a rock star. So the key is the setup. Then we have the show. That's the development. It's unfolding naturally. There's no conflict. There's no bombs blowing up. There's no big revelation. It's just an event that unfolds. Sometimes this is translated as an inheritance or a succession, right? So you can see it's an unfolding. Now, keeping in mind, we're working with translations here, so we have to get ourselves into the ballpark and then figure out the story that we want to write from that. There is a stronger sense in the translation of taking over or carrying on in this developmental step. So if we're looking at our diagram, we're here. This is our development, okay? So this is where the story is growing. What if you have your character make an assumption? This is an idea that fascinates me, which is why I want to experiment with this form. What if your character has made an assumption about themselves, about the world, or about a situation that is not quite accurate? That could be very interesting in terms of a character study story. So consider that. Then we have the 10. This is your turning point. It can be a twist. It takes the perception in a different direction. It could just be a turn of phrase or a turn of perception. It could be a realization. It could be a revelation that sheds a different light. Or if you're going with the assumption idea where your character has made that wrong assumption about something, this is where that assumption is challenged and turns. Perhaps there's an unforeseen event or a development, okay? So this is not a big challenge that they have to overcome, a conflict that pushes them. It's just something that they have to make up their mind about. And then the resolution. It's the outcome, or often, as I said, these stories just end. It's just over and the character walks away. How the character reacts to the twist is often the ending, and that's the ending itself. Maybe they walk away with a new perception or a new attitude. So with those prompt cards, and you could set them up the way that I did in the plot box, in that you could take each one that's relevant to each beat and put that prompt card behind it so that you always have them to refer to, or you can stick them up front like I did. But let's take this example, and I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to rob the plot box lookout. Okay, so I'm just going to stand these up in here so we can work with them in the same way. All right, so I've got my 4 sections. Now, my character went up to the mountain stream and caught a fish. So what if that's my introduction? Okay, that's my key moment. That's my character is getting ready. They're going on this trip. They're going up to catch the fish. Okay, so that's step 1. All right, so that goes behind the 1. What if my character comes back and I'll have to make this card because I didn't pre-write it. They catch the fish and they share. They catch the fish and they share that moment with their friend. Okay, that would be step 2. Okay, so that is my development. My development is this conversation that they come back and they show. Look at this little fish. It's beautiful. I love it. I caught it and I'm going to cook it up. All right. And they share that moment with their friend and they're so excited. They're so proud of this little mini journey, this little day trip that they've taken, and they've caught this little fish and just overjoyed at the sweetness of this moment and what they've done. Now, here's the twist. Are you ready? What if, in response to this moment that our character has shared, we've come to know this character, we've come to love them, we love the sweetness of them, the simplicity of going and catching this little fish and sharing it with their friend, and their friend's response is, oh, that's great. I went to the factory farm and I bought a huge fish. See how that hits? You're taking the sweetness of sharing this simple moment, this simple act of going fishing and catching this little fish, and rather than being supportive, sharing in the sweetness, what have you, the friend answers back with, oh, I went to the factory farm and I bought this huge fish. That is the twist. That is your 10 moment. So I'm going to slip that in there as my placeholder. Now, that brings me to my ketsu, right? My resolution. How is this going to end? Well, it's in the reaction. The end of my story is simply my main sweet character that we care about and are so happy for is sad and baffled at the way that their friend has reacted. See how that lands? Very different than your standard conflict-driven novel, but just as powerful and can be written with richness and really develop and look at those two characters and their interaction throughout this scene. So there it is, my friends. 2 very different examples. One, conflict-driven plot 8-point narrative, and the other, a very simple way of developing a story. You can make it as rich, as deep, as long as you wish. Again, thank you, Tatsuya, for the beautiful example that helped me walk through it. But that is how you do it, guys. That's how you do it. And then you just file your cards away, and when you're ready to sit down and write, you pull out whichever box you're working with. You pull out the cards that you've put in there to prompt yourself to get that writing done, and you get those words on the page. So there you have it. The 8-point structure and the Kishotenketsu structure. I hope that was helpful. I hope that gives you some ideas about how you can use these things. Consider this. What if you take this story structure and you integrate it into that one? Advanced maneuver, my friends. Start thinking about how can you Frankensystem these things together so that you can write the very best story that you can write. I know, advanced maneuvers, but I'm going to keep throwing them at you because you can handle it. So if you have any questions about what I've gone through, please drop me a comment. I will continue covering a few more plot systems. So the next video will be another walkthrough of 1 or 2. I don't know, depends. I don't want these to get too long. Let me know. If you don't mind the long video, I'll keep doing longer ones. But I like them around 10 or 15 minutes. Anyway, that's it. So I am going to go pull up the Zoom call because today is writing day over in Fusion Writing at LiLLiPub.org. We meet for sprints at noon. We do workshops on your writing at 1, and then we meet for sprints, or we keep talking about your writing, depending on what kind of mood we're in. Sometimes we just keep on workshopping. So that is that. All of those links will be down below. In the meantime, get those words out of your head and get them on the page because they won't stay in your head forever, and start building your Frankensystem. I'll see you next time.